Right. So with that, allow me to introduce tonight's speaker. Dr. Diana Boros is the Department Chair and Associate Professor of Political Theory at St. Mary's College of Maryland, a public liberal arts institution, and the National Public Honors College. Previously, she worked for the United States Senate, as well as for several senatorial and gubernatorial campaigns, and was also teaching professor of political science at Rutgers University, New Brunswick. She co-founded and advises the SMCM Public Art Collective, and is creator and host of the online video YouTube series Hosting Art. She has published two books, Creative Rebellion for the 21st Century, The Importance of Public and Interactive Art to Political Life in America, and Reimagining Public Space, the Frankfurt School in the 21st Century, and is currently at work on a third project. Please welcome Dr. Diana Boros.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicole. I really appreciate it. Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm so happy to be here to talk to you all about one of my favorite topics in the whole world, which is how to become more politically engaged and more politically active in our communities. And of course, I want to help you as community members in St. Mary's County to be more engaged in your local communities as well as more broadly and nationally. As you heard Nicole state in her introduction for me, I have interesting sort of experience working in the political realm prior to earning my PhD and starting to teach and coming to St. Mary's College to teach. I was working at a number of state and federal level campaigns, and then I worked for the United States Senate for a short period. And I love those experiences so much. I've also worked a little bit in the nonprofit realm, in the advocacy realm, and all those experiences ultimately brought me to where I am now, which is trying to empower students to become engaged community members and engaged citizens. As you might also have heard in that bio, that introduction that Nicole gave for me, my specific area of expertise now is looking at our public spaces and specifically the public art that can exist within those public spaces. I'm really interested in how artistic experiences of all kinds can help us to become more engaged in our communities. Right. So there's many different ways to be politically active. It is not only through sort of the most obvious avenues. Sometimes it's as simple as, going out into our communities and finding ways to work with those around us, our neighbors, our friends, community members, to build things that we're proud of, right? Services, experiences. One of my most favorite sort of small local political actions that I took on recently was, if you're familiar with the Little Library program, and if you're not, Google it. It's wonderful. I believe it's littlelibraries.org. But the Little Library program, if you've seen those little sort of boxes that they sometimes have in parks or by playgrounds or by schools, sometimes on the side of the road, and it's just a sort of a small way to create a tiny little library that doesn't take away, of course, from experiencing your libraries in your communities, your larger libraries. But the little libraries are ways to have sort of quicker access to books and more often, more frequent access to books. And so something I did recently was work with community members and my own family and friends to create two little libraries in my neighborhood because we didn't have any. And I thought it would be wonderful for all community members, kids and adults alike. And that was a really sort of satisfying project to work on. We engaged with all types of sort of different realms of the community. We had business owners who donated materials. We had a Boy Scout troop who donated their time to build the actual little library structure. We had, all sorts of community members and schools that participated and brought books to share. And we had a little sort of party to celebrate locally. And so that's just one small example of ways that you can be involved in your community. And I say that because I'm about to give you a presentation of all sorts of more structured ways to become involved in your community, because I really think it's important that everyone is empowered, that they understand who's representing them and where they're representing them and how that works and how they can communicate with the people that represent them politically. It's essential. But that is all to say that there's also very sort of easier ways and more local ways to become involved politically that I think is extremely valuable, both for ourselves and for the health of our communities and ultimately for the health of our democracy. That is all to say, I'd like to start, as I mentioned just a minute ago, with the whole idea of representation. So we forget sometimes we are very quick to call the United States a democracy, and it is, but more specifically, it's a democratic republic. A republic, meaning by definition, means that it is representative, right? It's not a direct democracy, right? Rather, we vote for people who then go to Annapolis or to DC, and then they represent our interests. That's the ideal, right? That's how it works. Um, and so representation is a key, perhaps the most key function of our democracy. And so it is, very, very important that people are educated and understand who is representing them and what that means, what they're doing, how to sort of gain access to them. And so, all of your representatives, every single one is not only sort of theoretically available to you, they have built in they call it constituent services, right? Constituents are those that they are representing, the people like me and you who voted or perhaps didn't vote for them to be in office, but they are the ones that are representing us. And constituent services means that there are people that are directly engaged. Their one and only job in that representative's office is to listen to your phone calls, read your emails, your letters, and respond to you. And so there are people that are absolutely ready to do that. And in my experience, for example, when I worked for the United States Senate, that, constituent services was not activated enough, was not used enough. They would have sort of sometimes bigger moments before a bill was up, right, for vote. Then you'd get maybe a lot of action on the phone calls and on the emails. But in general, I noticed even back then that, hey, there's really not a good amount of people regularly reaching out. Um, and I think it's important to change that. And I'm guessing that one of the reasons is that if people feel sort of distant from their representatives, right? Physically distant, maybe they're not sure exactly who they are, where they are, they're not sure they're really going to listen to them. And while of course we can't guarantee that what we want our representatives to do is what they do, because they have the tough job of sort of balancing the interests of their representatives, right? At the same time, it is absolutely within our power and our right to reach out to them and voice our needs and voice our concerns. And they will listen and they will respond. So on that note, I thought it would be useful to talk about our representatives, specifically in Maryland and specifically in St. Mary's County. So my first slide here says identifying those who represent you in the US Congress. So in the United States, we have what's called a federal system or federalism, right? It's a very unusual system. It's very unique to the United States, where we have a national government and then we have state governments, right? And often they are at odds, right? There can be a lot of tension between the mechanisms of the federal government and the workings of the state governments. Generally, federal law supersedes state law, right? We have the United States Constitution, which is the primary body of federal law, and that is the ultimate law of the land. Still, there are certain realms of law that are relegated to the states, where states have a significant amount of power. And so it's very important, right, that we have representatives at both levels. We have representatives both that go to DC, right, and represent our interests as citizens of Maryland, and they deal with national policy. But we also have representatives that go to Annapolis to the General Assembly and they deal with state policy and represent our interests. So we have multiple levels of representation, and you vote, and of course they are all elected representatives, so you have the ability to vote for all of them. So I have a series of Q&As on the slides that I hope are useful to you. The first one reads, what are congressional districts? So congressional districts, you might hear, people might say, what is your congressional district, or which district is being represented? So congressional districts broadly are the 435 areas from which members are elected to the US House of Representatives. So just a quick point of clarification. At the federal level, our legislature, which is one of the three branches of government, we have the executive branch, which consists of the presidency and all of the offices, all of the federal offices therein. We have the legislature, arguably the most important, significant, and largest realm, which consists of two bodies, the Senate and the House of Representatives. It's what we call a bicameral legislature. Bi is in two, right? It's split into two bodies. And of course, the third is the judiciary, consisting of the US Supreme Court down, right, to all of the circuit courts, appeals courts, et cetera. And so we have a bicameral legislature, which is a really interesting structure, actually, right? Many countries just have a singular legislature, but we have it structured out so that we have two different ways to represent the citizens of the United States at the federal level. One is via state, right? So the Senate consists of 100 senators, which means that there are 2 senators per state, as we have 50 states, right? It is not based on anything else. There is no consideration for population, size of the state, right, in terms of land mass, anything. It's simply that every state has 2 representatives, right, that are going, 2 senators in particular, that are going to go to the Senate and represent that state. On the other hand, the House of Representatives is a very different body. It's obviously much larger. It consists of 435 members, not 100. And it is much larger because it is decided and allocated based upon population. So not based upon state, but based upon population. So thereby, some states have many representatives, some states have very few. So congressional districts are the districts by which you allocate and then elect a representative to go to the House of Representatives and represent you. So what is your congressional district? It's the 5th congressional district. Maryland's 5th congressional district comprises all of Charles, St. Mary's, and Calvert counties, as well as smaller portions of Prince George's and Anne Arundel counties. Currently, the 5th district is represented by Steny Hoyer. He is a Democrat and has been in office since 1981, from 2007 to 2011, and then again recently from 2019 to 2023, who was House Majority Leader. Lots of experience. He's been in office for quite some time. Now, if we want to examine sort of the other elements of how Maryland fits in nationally in terms of representation in the House of Representatives, we might ask, how many congressional representatives does Maryland currently have as a state, right? How many representatives is all of Maryland sending to the House of Representatives? And that number is 8, which is a decent number. It's a comfortable number. It's not a high number, but it's not an extremely low number. Just to give you a sense, the most populated state in the land, which sends the most amount of representatives to the House of Representatives, is California. California, just to give you a comparative point, sends 52 representatives to the House. All right, so that is very high, right? So California has 52. 6 states, though, have only 1. Remember, this is based on population. So these are the 6 least populated states in the United States: Alaska, Delaware, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wyoming. So you can, be a state in the United States that is sending as only 1 representative, or you could have 52. So there is a wide range, but Maryland has 8. For a rather small state, it's a decent number because Maryland is fairly populated. So how many members of Congress are there broadly? So this is what I was speaking to earlier, but I want to make sure that we are clear about the details. So as I mentioned, bicameral Congress, 2 bodies within the legislature. When legislature, Congress, synonymous terms, right? So within Congress, there's 535 members. As I mentioned earlier, the 100 senators and then the 435 representatives that serve in the House. There are also, though, not to be forgotten, 4 delegates that go to the House of Representatives from U.S. territories and, of course, D.C., right? Taxation without representation, as all the license plates state. And 1 resident commissioner from the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. And the reason, by the way, those license plates state that in DC is because, of course, while there is a delegate, right, DC does not have state representation at the federal level. And that has been a movement for a long time to try to change that. So we have covered your congressional district. It is the 5th, represented by Steny Hoyer. You are also, of course, as a Marylander, you are represented by 2 senators in the United States Senate. They are Chris Van Hollen and Ben Cardin. Both have been in office for some time. Both are Democrats. So you have three representatives in total as a citizen of St. Mary's County, as a resident of St. Mary's County in Maryland, that represent you at the national level, that go to DC and represent your interests, that you directly are able to vote for, right? So on election day, when you get your sort of list of possibilities, right, that who you can vote for at the polls, this is who you're voting for. Now, I should mention that election years vary, right? So some election years are very exciting. For example, of course, next year will be exciting because it's a presidential election year. So presidents are elected every 4 years, and many people only vote every 4 years. And I always say this is a real shame because at the end of the day, a president, as important as they may be, do not directly represent you. They're not a representative, right? They're an executive. It's a different democratic function. Your representatives are the ones that you really need to be voting for, right? They're the ones that are supposed to be directly representing your interests. So it's really essential that we vote in elections that aren't just presidential elections. For example, this year. And so that's going to vary because representatives in the House are up for election every 2 years. So it's very frequent, while senators in the Senate are only reelected or up for reelection every 6 years. So House is two, President is four, Senate is six. So there's a staggering, right? So you obviously have House members are up for election much more often than anyone else, and senators have the sort of the most leeway, right? They're there for 6 years without the need to campaign and be up for reelection again. So that's to provide you an overview of how the legislature works, how representation works, how your republic, the United States, works. Now, on this next slide, I wanted to provide you some links. These are ways in which you can learn more about your representatives. So I chose three different, and there's more, but I chose three of the sort of most popular, most well-known websites that allow you to, in different ways, find your representatives. So usually you can either click on a map, it depends on the site, right? But there's a map in which you can click on your state, on your city, and find out who your representatives are. You can enter your address, right? You can enter your county, you can look at it more broadly or more locally, and it will provide you access to your representatives. But what's also neat about doing this, that even if you now know them, because you now know them, if you didn't a few minutes ago, you now do. But if you sort of look them up, you can go to their websites, you can look up everything about them. I mean, not just their About Us page, right? But you can find out how they have been voting. You can see their entire voting track record. You can see sort of the various committees that they have sat on, the various sort of ways they've been involved in Congress. And so it's a really interesting thing to do, and I highly recommend that everyone does that, just to know, right? Just to know what's going on and just to bear that in mind, especially when there are elections, but of course when there aren't, when there's just sort of stable representative function going on, right? The representatives are in place. And you, as a citizen, are constantly being affected by their decisions, sometimes in obvious and overt ways, and sometimes not so much, but we are. I also, of course, included a link to register to vote. If you are not registered to vote, I highly recommend you do so. It is easy, it is quick, and it's so important to do. Again, as I mentioned, I really recommend that I wish people would pay more attention to House and Senate races than they do, and not as maybe quite as much attention to the presidency, because while that's sort of the exciting one, the one that gets all the press attention, it's really your representatives that we need to really be paying attention to and thinking about and getting out and voting so that they are actually representative, right? Because if no one's coming out to vote, then they're representing a very sort of small portion of the population, and that's a shame, and that's a problem for democracy. So on that note, I mentioned there was multiple levels in which a citizen is represented. So in the Maryland General Assembly, which is of course in Annapolis, we have a state legislature. So it's really just like Congress, right? It's the state level version, and every state has this, right? So we have the national legislature, the federal legislature, and then every state has their own legislature that represents, that does the same practices and the same representation methods, but at the state level. So what are state legislative districts? So remember, we talked earlier about congressional districts. Well, now these are the equivalent at the state level. State legislative districts, or SLDs, are areas from which members are elected to state or equivalent entity legislatures. And I provided two websites here. Both are useful. One functions in the way I mentioned earlier. It's a map, and you click on the map and find where you are and who your representatives are. The other one functions via address, which sometimes is easier. It sort of depends how, visual of a person you are and what what you prefer to use. But both of them will get you the same result, and you can find out who your representatives are at the state level. And it's really interesting, to start to, it obviously gets, just like your representatives in Congress get less attention than does the president, your representatives at the state level get less attention than the ones at the federal level for sort of obvious reasons, right? They're more localized. They're less broad. Their work is less broad, but it's really, really, really important what happens at the state level. And often if you look at the bills that are being passed, many of the actions that are taking place in the General Assembly have often, not always, but often a more sort of direct, immediate effect on your life. So it's really, important to understand not only your congressional district and representative, but your state legislative district and representatives. So I also wanted to talk specifically about Election Day. So obviously Election Day just passed. We're about a month out, and we're only about 11 months until the next one, right? But election days are really, and all elections, I want to be really clear, every single year is a really exciting time to be involved in an election. And there's many different ways you can do that. For years and years and years, I actively participated in election day, and it was always really sort of fun and fulfilling. So if you click on that first link, which is a really great one, it just speaks generally to how to get involved in elections, how the political process works in Maryland, sort of different entities you can reach out to, you can sign up with. One really interesting way that you can be involved in elections, and a lot of people don't know about this option, and so often the same people do it over and over. And I think that it's really great to sort of inject new blood into the system. So I really encourage you, if you've never heard of this or if you've never thought of doing it, it's easier than you think, and I think it's a really, really interesting opportunity. And that is being an election judge. So what does an election judge do? Judges of elections are responsible for the administration of election procedures in the polling places on election day. They're in the position of ensuring that the election process is administered fairly and in accordance with the law. So there are those people, if you've ever gone to vote, that are going to check your ID, right? Look at your license, make sure that you are in fact registered, that you are in fact in the right polling place, that you are in fact voting for the right representatives, which is really important because that's happened to me. I once walked into the wrong polling place, right? I had it wrong, and they were like, nope, you're not here. You need to go down the street. And that's really important because if they were not doing their job well, you could end up voting for the wrong, right? Voting for representatives that don't represent you, right? So that's really important. They're also the people that after you fill out your ballot, that ensure that it, is submitted into the machine correctly, that your vote is counted for. They'll often show you, right? They'll say to you, hey, look, your vote just counted. It just went from 500 to 501. There you are. And so there are those people. Now, I will say serving as an election judge is a long day. You're there at the polls all day. I mean, it's easily a 15-hour day. So it is a commitment, but it's just that one day, and you get paid. It is a paid position. It's usually a few $100s for the day. And it's a wonderful service to democracy. It's a really wonderful way to be involved and to participate in the democratic system. On that note, though, there's other ways you can participate that are also less grueling. If any of you just heard, ooh, 15-hour day, I don't think I want to do that. Well, there's other ways to participate that are not quite so labor intensive. So here, on this slide, identifying partisan participation, I listed the parties in Maryland. So if you look at the top two links, these are the Maryland Democrats and the Maryland Republicans, broadly, the state parties, and specifically the links are for how to volunteer and get involved working for those parties, if you wish to do so. And by the way, you can be involved in the political process in nonpartisan ways, right? So you don't have to work for a party. You can, again, be an election judge and just work at the polls, right? You can work at the county level, the local level, and I'll speak more about that in just a minute. But if you are interested in working at the state level or the county level for a political party, this is the contact information that I was able to pull up for specifically the state parties up at the top, and then below that, the St. Mary's County's parties, the local parties. And in the middle there on the slide, it says to reach out to do get out the vote, or what we call GOTV. So if you're not familiar, this is another wonderful way to be involved on election day. And this is something I've loved doing. So get out the vote efforts are basically if you've ever had people knock on your door on election day and go, "Hi, would you like more information about such and such? We'd love for you to go out and vote. Your polling place is down the street," right? Sometimes they might even offer, services to, help get you to the polls. Sometimes people that do get out the vote will also like drive people to the polls. They'll let people know where their polling place is based on address, right? So they'll go to a specific neighborhood. Get out the vote is usually administered at the local level, but you can also reach out to the state parties and they can likely put you in touch with someone who can help more locally. But get out the vote efforts are also paid, by the way, but paid differently. So paid by the hour. It's, I'm not really sure what it would be, maybe $10 an hour or so. But it's generally a paid position as well. And you can usually it's all dependent on the locality, but usually you can sort of choose how much you want to do, right? So you could just do a few hours or whatever it is. But it's a nice way to feel like instead of just voting on election day, which is great, and that's enough, right? That's a wonderful way to participate in election day. But if you feel like you want to do more, you have the time and you have the ability, it's a great way to just like get more people out there. And it often works. I mean, as many people as may go, "Yeah, I know," or "I don't care," and may sort of close the door in your face. A whole lot of other people are like, "Oh, wow, I forgot it was even election day. Okay, yeah, where's my polling place? Thanks so much for the reminder." And so it's a great way to be involved locally and have it sort of feel more empowered on election day, I think, is to do GOTV. Um, so I also wanted to speak to political participation at the county level. So there's many ways that you can be involved at the county level. And by the way, county boards and commissions vary. So it's going to vary county to county. So for example, you might have a board of supervisors in one county and that doesn't exist in another county, right? So they might have sort of different names, and it depends. This is an excellent website, the one I put at the top of the page. This lists every committee, board, or commission in St. Mary's County that you could join and participate in. And it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a long list, right? So there's many, many different, and I'm talking like zoning boards and commissions, like, well, if you're really interested, if you're a business owner and you're interested in various ways in which businesses are affected by political decisions, right? By governmental decisions, there's ways to get involved in so many different aspects, whether it's like the food industry or whether it's the building industry, right? There's different ways to participate at the local level. And honestly, sometimes when people ask me like, okay, beyond something very, very local, like I mentioned my experience in my neighborhood building a little library, right? Besides like the most local, right, work and not wanting to work, say, in Annapolis or DC or do sort of more broad voter reach out. And people ask me, like, what could I do at the county level? A great way is to find that list of committees, boards, and commissions and sign up for one. Just try it out. Show up for a meeting. All of them have public meetings, right? So you have publicly accessible information on them. You can find out where they are meeting, how they are meeting nowadays. Most of them have, are streaming. They stream their meetings, right? So you can even sort of virtually find out what's going on in a really, really wonderful way, especially if you're someone that thinks, "Oh, I might potentially want to become involved politically, like actually serve in an elected position, but I'm not sure exactly where to start." One way is the traditional way, right? Run for mayor, right? Run for sort of mayor of your locality. But another way is to get started, meeting people and getting used to sort of what it's like to work in politics, what it's like to work with policies and commissions and committees, and a great way to do that is with these local boards. Another big one is the school board, right? Every county has a school board. Many are elected, but many are not. So prior to 1996, the St. Mary's County School Board was appointed and it was not elected. Many viewed it as a significant victory when it became an elected school board. There's counties all over the country that are currently, and in this last election just a month ago and next year, sort of working on how to change the structure of their school board. And many who have appointed school boards wish for them to be elected, right? Because when you have an elected board, then it is directly accountable to the people, right? Again, that whole structure of representation, that democratic process is in play. You're actually having a say in who is going on these positions. And it's a really, really important board, especially if you have children that attend public schools, because they are making very significant decisions about everything from structural changes to the schools to curricular changes, lots of changes that will absolutely directly affect your child. So it's really, if you have a child that goes to one of the public schools. And so the school board is a really great place. Also, they tend to make a lot of decisions, right? They tend to be really active. So just like I mentioned, committees, boards, and commissions locally are a great way to get involved. I always say the school board is an excellent way, particularly if you're a parent, is just a really, because you're serving two things at once, right? You're serving the democratic process and the representative process, and you're getting you're getting involved in politics, and you're making that change, you're making that difference. But you're also directly serving your family, right? If your children go to those schools, then you're becoming you're trying to raise your voice in how the school functions in various ways for the children. In St. Mary's County, there's also the CSMC. So the commissioners of St. Mary's County, as it says here, have legislative and executive functions. What does that mean? So the St. Mary's government is administered by the commissioners of St. Mary's County. The CSMC consists of 5 members elected to 4-year terms. This includes a president and 4 district commissioners. All 5 are elected at large by voters, right? So often on election day, if you vote in a presidential election year, then of course at the top will be the president. If you don't, at the top will be the Senate. So it always goes president, Senate, House, state representatives, and down, right? As so the most broad. The ones at the very bottom, right, will be your county commissioners. Ones are sort of towards the end of your polling sheet, your voting sheet. So these are, and it just says that they're elected at large by voters all across the county, but district commissioners have to reside in the district that they represent. So even the county itself is split into districts, and they have to actually be residents of that district in order to serve that district. So again, like relying on this representative process to say, here is your area where you live. You are now representing the community that you are in, and that you are around. But these are also elected positions. And I would argue they are the sort of the often the least known about, right? The ones that many people don't pay so much attention to. They know who they're supposed to vote for president, maybe even Senate, maybe even House, right? But it gets down to that, and they're like, I don't know, right? I'm not really sure, what these people do. And there's a lot that they do. Again, things like zoning laws, right? Anything to do with zoning, businesses, schools, those decisions are made at the county level. And so sometimes it's relatively stable, relatively stagnant, and there's nothing sort of really important coming down the pipe. And so people are not sort of invigorated to learn about what's going on at the county level. But at other times, something is happening, right? Like, say there is a large corporation that's trying to come into the county. Right? Like a new grocery store or warehouse is trying to set up shop in the county, and maybe some residents are upset, right? They don't want that to happen. So they've done what they could on their end, perhaps started a petition, perhaps submitted that petition to the county to try to, voice their concern and stop that from happening. When something like that is in play, it's really important to pay attention to who that commissioner is and how they feel about said project, right? And just like I mentioned earlier, you can reach out to your representatives, both at the state level and the congressional level, and voice your concerns. They're there for you in that way. In a much more direct way, you can just pick up the phone and call your county commissioner or send them an email and discuss those concerns with them about what's going on locally. Also, sometimes just gain a lot of valuable information, right? Even if you're not particularly upset or concerned about something, just find out what is going on. And that is often the people who will have that information. The last one I wanted to mention is also one that I would put up there with the school board that is a really sort of interesting way to get involved. So I'm talking, of course, about the Recreation and Parks Department. Now, these are generally not elected positions, but they are positions that serve the community in really, really interesting and robust ways, right? They're the ones that make sure that we have parks to go to and public spaces to enjoy, programming to enjoy, just like your local library that does all these wonderful programs for you. Parks also do really, really wonderful programming for adults and children alike, and it's another wonderful way to be involved. Again, maybe not in something so directly political, but in a way that you know you are providing your community with a service. And that's ultimately what politics is about, right? At the end of the day, I would argue if you are someone that is sort of feeling that itch to become more involved, you're feeling like, I want to raise my voice, I want to have a say outside of my home, outside of my street, right? And what's going on in the world. Often we have big ideas about that, right? We want to say something to our congressman, our senator, our president. But other times it's simply saying, I am sad that my child doesn't have a playground to play in that is not sort of run down with broken parts, right? I want to sort of fight to make that happen, to make a space that is safer and cleaner for those around me and for my own children. And a great way to become involved is that Recreation and Parks Department. Again, something that you will see in every county, and of course, St. Mary's has one. So I just wanted to cover these ways and sort of work from the top down, right? Start at the federal representative level, move down to the state, and then move down to the county. And hopefully I have given you a sense today of a multitude of ways in which you can exercise your right as a citizen of the United States and as a citizen of Maryland and as a citizen of St. Mary's County to voice your concerns, to gain more access, more information to knowledge about various policies and initiatives that you've maybe heard about or that you wish were taking place. And I very much encourage you to do so. I know it can seem daunting. I know that it sometimes it feels like, well, how will I do that? But once you start, click on those websites, look at those emails, look at those phone numbers and try. I think often people are surprised at how once they do that, once they sort of take that first step, it all starts to connect, right? They meet people, they have conversations, and sort of suddenly they're involved. And to some extent, I think once you are, it's like you can't go back. I think in some sense, it's both addictive. It's really like a wonderful experience to be politically active. But also you make connections that I think are really valuable and feel good and feel important for us as citizens. So that is all I have for you today, and I would love to hear questions and hopefully I can answer them. Thank you.
So we do have a couple things coming into the Q&A. One thing is actually a reminder to folks that Maryland has same-day voter registration at the polls, which is a really important thing. So if you forgot to
Yeah.
plan ahead, but you want to be involved, day of is not too late. Thank you
Yeah.
for that. And then let's see. Looks like Amelia has a question. She says, I was really hoping this presentation would go to the next level in terms of involvement. For example, what is the process to get on a ballot for an upcoming election, either as an individual or an initiative?
So just to be clear, as an initiative, I'm guessing that you mean if you have a concern and nobody is talking about it at the political level, like what is the process to make that happen? And then also you mean like how do you become how do you gain access to be elected? Is that what you mean?
So Amelia, you are unmuted if you'd like to answer, or I can keep looking into the Q&A or chat function.
Oh.
Maybe we can hang on to that, get a little more information, and then move on. Oh, she says correct. So,
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Am I still screen sharing, by the way?
nope.
Okay. I might, if I can pull this up, I will do so. But so the short answer is, so let me be clear. It is not an easy process to get on a ballot at a higher level of government in the United States. So if the average citizen does not just decide to sort of, generally speaking, to run for governor or Congress or senator or president. It takes an enormous amount of money and campaigning prowess to sort of get on those ballots. At the local level, though, is obviously where you would want to start. So the people that I've known personally that ended up going from sort of being the average citizen to becoming an elected official, They started, actually, now that I think about it, every person I know personally who did that started at the school board. It's a really sort of interesting way to meet people, to meet the right people, to start making those connections and sort of talking to people about what they're doing. Someone else went from getting elected to the school board to getting elected to as a county commissioner, and friend they're still working as a county commissioner, but and you can have a lot of say at that level. um I'm sorry, I didn't is there another question from the same person? I'm trying
Yeah,
to
so
follow the
she
Q&A.
wound up she did give an example or two. So for instance, if we wanted ranked choice voting to be added to the ballot, or if you wanted to run for office, which I do believe you addressed.
Yeah, so vote running for office, I highly encourage the most local action. And I have personally seen a lot of efficacy starting at the school board and sort of moving to the county commissioner level. It's often where, so the school board is, I would say, where the least political experience is expected, right? When you are being elected there, you can often run. I've seen people run and run effectively and win campaigns just on I'm a mother, right? And I'm looking to get more involved and more engaged in my community. And so I think that's a really important, like really great way to start. Start small. It's definitely about like steps, right? It's, another way is the town, a small town I grew up in, the mayor was a local business person, right? Ran for mayor. No one sort of expected political experience. And they were a mayor for a long time, I think over a decade. They were reelected a few times. And then after that, once you have that experience, right, then you can say, hey, I have political experience. I've done this for a while. I've engaged at the state level, right? Because mayors will go and engage in various state level activities. The governor will call various forums for all mayors, things like that, county forums for mayors. So then once you actually do the job, you gain a whole lot of valuable political experience and access so that you can then sort of take the next step. As for initiatives, so if you're interested in something that's not on the ballot and no one's voting for it, so usually the process is that there's a required number of signatures, and you need to get, just as you would sort of get a petition going, it's essentially the same idea. You need enough people who are registered voters in the area in which you would like it to be on the ballot, right? So a registered voter in, say, St. Mary's County or in Maryland, depending on what level the initiative is, you take that required number of signatures in order to get that initiative on the ballot, right? So it's going to vary exactly sort of what you're looking at, what the initiative is, where you want it. Usually at the very local level, like if it's a county initiative, I'd recommend just calling the county offices, right? Calling the county commissioners and saying that there's this initiative I would like, and they can tell you exactly the process. Sometimes at the county level, it's not a grueling process, right? And you don't need that, but usually there is a process of signature gathering to show that there is interest in the ballot, right? Usually a singular individual cannot have an initiative. There has to be a democratic structure set up for that initiative, right? That there is democratic interest. So and then when we have initiatives, right? If you've ever voted for an initiative, they're usually at the very end, right? And when you're going to vote for people, at the bottom of that, there'll be an initiative, and sometimes they're direct initiatives. So it'll be like placed on the ballot, and you can actually vote yay or nay, right, on that initiative. If it's an indirect initiative, then it's going to have to go before a legislative body, such as the state legislator, even after you get the signatures, in order so that the legislator will then vote as to whether that initiative is then going to be either like they're going to enact it via vote in the legislature, or it will become a direct initiative and go to ballot. So there's sort of a difference. There is a chance, in other words, that you would get enough signatures to get an initiative in like the hands of the legislature, and they could potentially just vote to enact that legislature and not even have it go to ballot. So that's possible too.
Oh, great. So we have two folks in the chat who have been Really helpful providing a bunch of information. We have Marcia and Jennifer Rayleigh here. So as far as ways in which people can connect with our county commissioners, there are quarterly public forums at which citizens have the opportunity to speak for up to 3 minutes. One can easily send emails to all commissioners. Again, that's that constituent services, right? They're here to listen to us. We're their constituents. And for the first time, we have town hall meetings that have been started by Commissioner Ostro. He has held 3 so far, and they have been terrific ways to talk with him and others. Um, in regards to some of those committees that you mentioned, Diana, Jennifer here says there's lots of available openings for the committees, boards, and commissions for St. Mary's County. It is a great way to get involved, and I can personally attest to that there are available openings, and you can get involved right away. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at all these Q&As and sort of answer as I see them. You can definitely register to vote when you get your driver's license. It's actually the most common way that people register to vote is through the DMV. That's a really common way, but if you haven't been to the DMV in a while, right, then you're likely not going to go that route. So you can definitely just click on the link that I provided, and there are others by which you can register to vote, pretty easily. I appreciate that information, Nicole, that you just read out loud about the St. Mary's County Commissions having lots of available seats. Generally, that's always true, just in all counties all the time. There is a surprising amount of space for people to get involved, right? Like we might think like, oh, well, I don't have any experience and I don't know, I don't know what these people are doing. Do they really want me to get involved? Generally speaking, I will say there's room and people are inviting and welcoming. That has been my experience. And so I absolutely encourage you to do that. And again, that's where you get the experience. That's when you can actually start to have that political experience and you really sort of see everything a little bit differently once you start to engage with those meetings and those processes. So I really encourage that. I'm reading some of the others here. I see the League of Women Voters in St. Mary's County. Awesome, great mention. They're a nonpartisan group, and they're all about ensuring that women and all voters have access to the political system. Yeah, they're awesome. League of Women Voters does great work all across the country, and I'm glad to know that they are doing good work in St. Mary's County. Thank you for that. Then they also wrote, it's important to know that most positions in this county are elected county-wide, including the commissioners. For the Board of Ed must one live, but must campaign and wait. Right, yes, exactly. And that's the point I tried to make. Yes, so you have to live in the district from which you are, the district in which you are representing, but they're all countywide elections. Yeah, if I didn't make that explicitly clear, that's absolutely true. And so thank you for that. St. Mary's has the Citizens Academy. Interesting. This I'm not familiar with. The Citizens Academy. You can learn about your local county government and the different functions of each department. I love it. How wonderful. We need a Citizens Academy everywhere. I love that name too. That's awesome. Oh yeah, someone else wrote about the Citizens Academy. I'm seeing it. That's really, really wonderful. I mean, we need a national Citizens Academy. We need a Citizens Academy in schools. Something I think about a lot is how, and I wonder how many of you are familiar with this, but a few sort of generations back, civics classes in the United States were standard, right? Every public school offered civics classes, and that essentially was sort of a citizens academy, right? But they've decreased so significantly, so that like broadly speaking, most public schools in the United States no longer offer civics classes, and I think that's a real shame. I think it's a real problem. So I love this Citizens Academy. I'll have to look into it. I'm like sort of reading all over the place. I don't know, Nicole, if you want to direct me anywhere, but I see another one about the Citizens Academy. And then they mentioned the Board of Elections is in Leonardtown. If you want to help to register voters, the LDIP, the League of Women Voters, has regular trainings at the Board of Education. You can help to register voters at public events and at our high schools. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's really, really great. I'm looking at the top one thing. For St. Mary's County, do I vote for the commissioner that represents my county district like I do my Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So you do vote for county commissioners have 4-year terms, just like the United States president. So you do vote every 4 years for them. Um, right, and then we have Marcia's comment about positions in the county being elected countywide. Yes, thank you for that. Absolutely true. Can the commissioners stop the president from changing local gas prices? No, I don't believe they can. Not quite that easy. Amelia writes, maybe I'm looking for more specifics. Is there a place where we can find out the specifics of the process you mentioned, such as what form you need, how many signatures, who's currently on a ballot for the position before the time to be added to the ballot closes? So again, we would need to know, what are you looking for, a state level, federal level, state level, or county level initiative? That's going to be really important. But I assume that maybe you're thinking locally at the county level, in which case the county commissioner's website is where you're going to want to start to find out the exact. I see what you mean. Like, okay, how many signatures do I need? Where's the form? I want to do it tomorrow. I would contact the county commissioner's office. Absolutely. They should be able to help you with all of that.
I also imagine perhaps the Citizens Academy might have some
Yeah.
information on that as
Yeah,
well.
right. Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like
Learned something here myself here today too.
yeah, that's really, really great. I'm going to be looking into that.
All right. I did actually have a question for you. So your published works discuss the critical theory of society, which is to say essentially the importance of public space and art to democracy. Can you speak to their relevance in affecting change and how we can leverage those in our communities?
So leverage what exactly?
Art, and public space.
Oh, yeah. So thank you for that question. Yeah, I mean, it's the thing about art and politics, it's tough because generally speaking, funding for the arts is dismal, right? It's generally speaking, it's the first program that's cut in schools, is arts programs, music programs, nationally, where the funding is often cut for sort of national arts funding. So in general, it's a relative struggle. But what I think is so important is that in general, I think that art is often seen as maybe not so important and often is not so accessible, right? It's seen as secondary to a lot of things, and it's also often really prohibitively expensive, inaccessible, etc. Um, so I think when we can bring art to public spaces, to outdoor spaces, to communities, to schools, to children's centers, to our public localities of all kinds, whether it's, the cities, the center of town, the bus stop, whatever it might be, I think it helps people to engage with each other, which is ultimately, I think, truly what politics is all about. It's about us engaging with each other instead of staying home, right? And only engaging with ourselves and our families. It's about like dealing with the public, dealing with the community. And often, it's hard to get people out doing those things. And some people, maybe like all of you who chose to attend today, are already interested, right, in how I can raise my voice politically, how I can get more involved. But sometimes, especially for those that may not have that urge, right, to be politically active in that sort of overt political way, I think often artistic experiences, creative experiences, public outdoor experiences that are communal and collaborative and community building can really get people sort of talking to each other. And really, that is the heart of democracy, is people talking to each other and working together and coming up with different ideas and initiatives and concerns that they may share. And so, yeah, that's sort of the short answer. I hope that helps, Nicole.
Definitely. Thank you. So we are just about out of time. But before we wrap up, I would again like to extend my thanks to you, Diana, for joining us here today. Thank you all for coming. I hope this program was of value to you. Have a nice night.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everyone.